My name is Maya Thompson, and if you had told me 4 years ago that I'd be standing on a stage at graduation, applauded by hundreds while my parents sat frozen in their seats, ashamed, speechless, and exposed, I would have laughed through the ache in my chest. But that day did come, and it wasn't luck or chance that brought me there. It was pain. It was anger. It was every single time I was told I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or worth the investment. I grew up in Clearwater, a sleepy town in North Carolina, in a white brick house that looked perfect on the outside. Inside, not so much. My parents, Thomas and Karen Thompson, were both high school teachers. Stable, predictable, routine-driven people who loved order, praised perfection, and valued appearances above all else. Then there was my sister, Ivy. Ivy, with her flawless skin, cello-shaped curls, and a laugh that could win awards. Ivy, who got straight A's without trying, who could cry on cue, who was practically built for admiration. We were only 18 months apart, but it always felt like we lived in two different homes under the same roof. She was the center, the sun, and I was a moon they forgot to follow. Christmas? Ivy got laptops, jewelry, designer bags. I got journals, secondhand sweaters, sometimes nothing at all. Mom would always say, "You're the grounded one, Maya. Ivy needs more help to shine." School? When Ivy was on the cheer squad, they showed up to every game. When I won a regional science fair, they sent a text. "Congrats! Don't forget to do your chores." At first, I made excuses for them. Maybe they were busy. Maybe I wasn't that impressive. But over time, the message settled into my bones. You are second best. The final nail in the coffin came during senior year. Ivy and I both got into Kingston University. Her for political science, me for business analytics. I remember our acceptance letters arriving on the same day. I ran downstairs, waving mine in the air. "I got in! Full acceptance." Dad barely looked up from his paper. "That's nice. Did you help Ivy with her essay follow-up yet?" Seconds later, Ivy walked in with her envelope. She shrieked. Mom cried. Dad popped champagne. I stood there, stunned, invisible once again. 2 weeks later, during dinner, Dad said the words that split me in half. "We've saved for one college tuition, and we're giving it to Ivy." No apology, no conversation, just a decision like a business deal. "You're resourceful," Mom added. "You'll find a way." It was then I knew. I was on my own, but I made a vow that night. They would regret underestimating me, and I would build something so big, so undeniable, that they'd be forced to watch. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or beg or try to convince them they were wrong. Instead, I closed my bedroom door, turned on my laptop, and started searching. Scholarships, grants, student loans, part-time jobs near Kingston. I found forums for low-income students, watched YouTube videos about surviving college on a budget. I subscribed to every newsletter promising financial aid advice. I applied to 20 scholarships in the next 3 weeks. The first one I won was only $500, but it felt like $1 million. During the summer, while Ivy and my parents traveled to visit Kingston's campus and decorated her dorm room, I worked 3 jobs: cashier at the grocery store, server at a diner, and weekend babysitter for a family across town. I saved every dollar. I skipped nights out with friends. I sewed a rip in my only work shoes with dental floss. I kept telling myself, this is temporary. They gave Ivy a launch pad. I'll build my own. By the time August rolled around, I had secured enough in scholarships and federal loans to cover my first semester. Not enough for dorms, though. So I found a shared apartment 40 minutes from campus with 2 strangers I met online. Rent was cheap, so were the floors, walls, and locks. But it was mine. I moved myself in. Just me, my secondhand suitcase, and an air mattress. No send-off party, no new laptop. My parents gave me a half-hearted hug the night before I left. "Be careful, Maya," Mom said. "Don't push yourself too hard." "Make good choices," Dad added, already walking away. Ivy left with fanfare, car packed to the brim, a catered lunch at the dorms, and a heartfelt Instagram post from Mom titled, "Our Future World Changer." I didn't even get a like on my own college acceptance post. But that fall, I stepped onto Kingston's campus wearing the same sneakers I'd had since junior year. Heart pounding, head held high. I was not going to be overlooked again. Within a week, I landed a part-time job at the campus coffee house and a weekend gig doing remote admin work for a local law office. My schedule was brutal. 6 a.m., open shifts, back-to-back lectures, late night studying, then work calls until 1 a.m. I kept a sticky note above my desk. No one is coming. You have to do this. And slowly, quietly, I began to rise. That first semester nearly broke me. My body ran on caffeine and panic. I studied flashcards during lunch breaks and typed essays on the bus ride home. I stretched every dollar, every hour, every ounce of energy I had. But when the grades came in, 4.0 GPA, I stared at my student portal in shock. Then I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I had finally proved, if only to myself, that I could do this. Nobody in my family even asked how my finals went. That winter break, while Ivy flew to Costa Rica with her new sorority sisters, I stayed back to work full-time and pick up extra shifts. I lived off instant noodles and thrift store sweaters, but I also built relationships with people who would become the support system I never had. Like Luis, the night shift supervisor at the coffee house, who always slipped me extra pastries at closing and taught me how to negotiate a raise. Or Dr. Campbell, my intro to business professor, who called me into her office one day and said, "You have more initiative than any student I've taught in 5 years. Have you considered applying for our sophomore research internship?" It was unpaid, but prestigious. I took it and quit one of my jobs to make room. It meant more late nights and tighter budgets. But it also meant access to real-world experience, alumni networks, and mentorship. By sophomore year, I was tutoring stats to juniors, leading a student-run business club, and taking on freelance spreadsheet work for a local startup. I still worked weekends at the coffee house, still couldn't afford to go home for holidays, still didn't get a single call from my parents unless it was Ivy's birthday. But I was building something, and the best part, nobody could take it away from me. One late night, while helping clean the espresso machine, Luis said, "You know what's funny, Maya? You're the kind of person people remember after college. Not for the parties, but for how you grind." I smiled. I was starting to believe it too. That spring, something shifted. A visiting alum who had heard me speak at a club meeting offered me a paid internship at his data analytics firm for the summer. The stipend was decent, and it came with housing. It felt like the first domino falling in a better direction. Meanwhile, Ivy had begun struggling. Turns out, coasting on charm and connections only gets you so far. Political theory was hard. Essay deadlines were unyielding. Ivy called me one night, the first time in over a year, asking if I could explain regression analysis to her. "You do know I'm a business major, not a miracle worker, right?" I joked. She laughed nervously. "Yeah, but you always seem to have it together." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me wanted to say, "Now you call?" After all the birthdays missed and calls ignored? But I didn't. Because deep down, I wasn't doing all this just to spite her. I was doing it for me. So I walked her through the stats, and when she passed that class, she sent a text with a single line, "Thank you. I know I haven't always said it, but I'm proud of you." It hit me harder than I expected. It didn't fix everything, but it cracked the ice. That summer at the internship, I pitched a system that saved the firm over $10,000 in quarterly costs. They offered to extend my internship into the fall. I negotiated remote work hours around my class schedule. Junior year came, and I didn't just keep up. I started winning. By junior spring, my name was starting to circulate. I was the girl with 2 jobs, perfect grades, and a sharp tongue in class debates. The business faculty noticed. Alumni noticed. Even the dean of students pulled me aside after a guest panel discussion. "You've got something rare, Maya," she said. "You don't wait to be invited. You build your own table." That conversation led to my nomination for the Horizon Fellowship, a competitive program for student entrepreneurs. I submitted my business proposal for a digital consultancy focused on helping small local businesses transition online. 2 months later, I was named a finalist. That same week, Ivy showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood there, in designer jeans and puffy eyes. "Can I come in?" I was stunned, but I nodded. We sat on the edge of my bed, the only furniture besides a desk and a pile of books. "They don't see you," she said softly. "They never have. And I think I've spent my whole life pretending not to notice because it made things easier for me." I didn't know what to say. She took a deep breath. "But I see you now, and I'm sorry." Ivy didn't magically become my best friend overnight, but from that moment she tried. She started asking about my projects, cheering me on. She even turned down a luxury spring break trip to spend a weekend helping me prep for my final pitch. The Horizon Fellowship presentation was held in front of a panel of investors, faculty, and alumni. I stood there in a $5 thrift store blazer and spoke from the gut about growing up invisible, about building something out of necessity, and about why overlooked businesses and students deserve better tools. I walked out of that room with a $25,000 seed grant and a standing ovation. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the email confirmation with tears in my eyes. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was surviving college. I was winning it. Senior year came, and everything accelerated. My consultancy took off. I hired 2 other students to help manage accounts. I was invited to speak on panels, led workshops, and landed a summer offer from a national consulting firm with a starting salary higher than both my parents combined. Still, they didn't ask. Still, they didn't know. Until graduation day. The sky was cloudless on graduation morning, the kind of clear blue that feels like a blessing. I dressed in silence, the gown, the sash from the Horizon Fellowship, the cords from academic honors, all symbols I had earned through sweat and solitude. I wrapped a narrow blue ribbon around my wrist, a small nod to the woman who had supported me from the very beginning, my grandmother, Evelyn. She couldn't travel anymore, but she had mailed me a note the week before. "Shine loudly, my brave girl. Make them listen." Ivy met me at the student lineup. She adjusted my cap without saying anything, but her eyes were wet. "They're here," she whispered. "Front row, still bragging about how they raised 2 graduates." I laughed bitterly, one of whom they didn't even fund. She squeezed my hand. "Today, you speak for yourself. Not for them, not against them, just for you." I carried those words with me as we marched into the auditorium. Thousands of families. Applause, flashing cameras. My name tucked somewhere deep in the program under student speaker. When I crossed the stage for my diploma, there was polite clapping. When Ivy did, Mom stood and took photos like she was documenting the coronation of a queen. But when the announcer said, "Our next speaker, representing the School of Business, is Maya Thompson, recipient of the Horizon Fellowship and founder of Blue Light Strategies," the audience hushed. I stepped up to the podium, breath steady, heart racing. 4 years ago, I began. I arrived at Kingston with no funding, no fanfare, and no backup plan. I worked nights. I took morning classes. I built a business in between. I made it work, not because I had everything, but because I was told I had nothing. A pause. Deep breath. This school taught me a lot, but adversity taught me more. It taught me that the people who overlook you might not always be your enemies. Sometimes they're just mirrors reflecting their own limits. It taught me to turn rejection into strategy. And it taught me that you don't need permission to succeed. You just need persistence. I looked out into the crowd. My parents were sitting still. My mom's smile frozen. My dad adjusting his tie, visibly flushed. Ivy, however, was beaming. "To anyone who's ever been underestimated," I said, voice clear, "you owe it to yourself to make that underestimation the worst mistake they ever made." The room erupted, a standing ovation, and for the first time in my life, I saw my parents look at me. Not like an obligation, not like a shadow behind their golden child, but as someone they had completely, catastrophically misjudged. When the ceremony ended, people rushed forward, professors, classmates, even strangers. And my parents? They stood off to the side. "You didn't tell us you were giving a speech," my father said stiffly. "You didn't ask," I replied. My mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Ivy stepped between us. "Let's not pretend today was yours to claim." I nodded toward the cluster of faculty and friends waiting for me. "I've got another celebration to attend, with the people who showed up before they had a reason to." And I walked away. The post-ceremony celebration hosted by the School of Business was everything my family dinners had never been. Warm, proud, full of people who saw me. Dr. Campbell gave a toast in my honor. My team from Blue Light Strategies surprised me with a custom plaque that read, "Built from grit, driven by fire." Ivy stayed close, never once checking her phone. She mingled, laughed, even took selfies with my professors. For the first time, she looked like my sister, not the version shaped by our parents, but someone entirely new. That evening, as I packed up gifts and hugged my mentors goodbye, she said, "Do you want to skip the family dinner?" We could go to Evelyn's instead. I hesitated. A younger me would have skipped it out of spite, but the woman I had become wanted something else entirely. Not revenge, not recognition, just resolution. So we went. The rental house was lit up like a Pinterest board. Catered food, champagne, balloons with Ivy's name, and a single sad little banner that said, "Congratulations, Maya and Ivy." When we walked in, conversation died. Everyone had heard the speech. Everyone had seen the standing ovation. Mom rushed up with a shaky smile. "You were incredible, sweetheart. Why didn't you tell us about any of this?" I raised an eyebrow. Would it have made a difference? Dad cleared his throat. Of course it would have. We're proud of you. It sounded like a line rehearsed in the mirror. Aunt Lila, who'd barely spoken to me in years, piped up. No one told us you built a business. Why didn't your parents say anything? There it was, the crack in the foundation. The rest of the evening passed in awkward fragments. Relatives asked about my job offer. Grandma Evelyn called to cry and remind me I was her legacy. Ivy deflected questions like a pro. And my parents? They tried, awkward jokes, offering leftovers, asking where I'd be living, but I'd stopped needing them to change. Later, as Ivy and I left, she turned to me. You know they're scared now, right? Not because of what you said, but because everyone else finally sees what they never wanted to. I nodded. Let them sit with that. We spent the next week at Grandma Evelyn's, just the three of us, cooking, resting, planning our futures. We laughed harder than we had in years. Eventually, my parents reached out again, this time with an invitation, lunch. No agenda, no celebration, just them. I went. They fumbled through apologies, some half-formed, some real. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They didn't deserve it yet, but they owned what they could. We were wrong, Mom said, tears in her eyes, and it cost us more than we realized. I looked at them, not as the giants of my childhood, but as flawed people who had run out of excuses. I'm open to a new relationship, I said, but only if it starts with the truth. That was the beginning, not of healing everything, but of no longer carrying it alone. 3 weeks after graduation, I moved into my new apartment overlooking the city skyline. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, rented with my own signature, decorated with secondhand finds, and framed reminders of what I'd overcome. My first day at the consulting firm was surreal. Polished glass doors, fast-talking analysts, a name badge with my title, Junior Strategy Associate. The girl who had once served lattes now advised Fortune 500 companies. I brought that same fire to my new job that I'd used to push through college. Discipline, hunger, and no fear of late nights. Within months, I earned my first promotion. Meanwhile, Blue Light Strategies continued to thrive. My student team evolved into part-time professionals. We started specializing in minority-owned businesses and first-time founders, clients who reminded me of myself. In the fall, I partnered with Kingston's Business School to create a mentorship fund, the RISE Initiative. It provided small grants and one-on-one guidance for students with no safety net. Ivy helped me draft the application materials. I can't believe how far you've taken this, she said one night, reviewing a proposal. You've turned pain into purpose. I smiled. It's the only kind of alchemy I believe in. She eventually took a job in nonprofit advocacy, working with underfunded schools. We had Sunday dinners, called each other during bad days, and became what we'd never had growing up, a team. As for our parents, we rebuilt something slow and honest. No illusions, no rewriting history. They came to my RISE Initiative launch, sat in the back, clapped carefully. They still didn't fully understand me, but they no longer tried to control the narrative. One afternoon, Dad pulled me aside. I used to think success looked like safety. He said, turns out it looks like you. I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I just nodded. Because I had already known that. It wasn't about finally being seen. It was about seeing myself clearly and never letting that vision get blurred again. If you're listening to this and wondering whether you can make it without approval, without a clear path, without anyone cheering, you can. You just have to believe that quiet fire inside you is enough to light the way. Because it is. And you are. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, I hope you'll share it. Not just with others, but with the version of yourself that once doubted what was possible. You're more than anyone ever saw, especially the ones who never looked.